Vecthar stood in the transport bay of the human vessel, his four eyes blinking in sequence as he processed the scene before him. The military analyst had served the Xylothian Empire for 30 cycles, observing countless species in combat. He had watched warriors who could tear through steel with their bare claws. He had documented soldiers who felt no pain, no fear, no hesitation. And now, the Galactic Coalition assigned him to study humans. Humans, the soft creatures from the outer rim who cried when they felt sad and laughed for no tactical reason. Vecthar had read their biological reports. They were weak compared to most species. Their skin tore easily. Their bones broke under pressure that other species would barely notice. They needed sleep every single day, wasting hours in vulnerability. Most ridiculous of all, they let emotions control their decisions. The Coalition wanted data before granting humans full military integration. Vecthar would provide that data. He would document their inevitable failures, their emotional breakdowns, their tactical incompetence. Then the Coalition would understand that some species were simply not meant for warfare. A human approached him. The identification badge read, Captain Min-Seok Park. He was tall for his species, with dark hair and eyes that seemed to carry some weight Vecthar could not measure. The captain extended his hand in the human greeting gesture. Observer Vecthar, welcome aboard the Aegis Dawn. We're honored to have you with us. Honored. Vecthar noted the unnecessary emotional language. He touched the captain's hand briefly, fulfilling the ritual. I am here to observe and document. Nothing more. Captain Park smiled. Another emotional display that served no tactical purpose. Of course. Lieutenant Choi will show you to your quarters and explain our current mission. The lieutenant was a woman with sharp eyes and quick movements. She led Vecthar through corridors that seemed too bright, too decorated with personal items and photographs. Other species kept their military vessels sterile and efficient. Humans cluttered theirs with memories. We're on evacuation duty, Lieutenant Hae-Won Choi explained as they walked. 3 colony worlds in the Kepler sector are in the path of a hostile fleet. We're moving civilian populations to safety before the enemy arrives. Vecthar's mandibles clicked in what his species used as a sigh. Evacuation, not combat. Protecting civilians is combat, the lieutenant said quietly. Just a different kind. She showed him to quarters that were unnecessarily comfortable. Humans wasted space on soft sleeping surfaces and temperature controls adjusted for comfort rather than mere survival. Vecthar set up his recording equipment and began his documentation. Over the next 3 days, he watched the crew of the Aegis Dawn work. They spent endless hours helping civilians board transport ships, old humans who moved slowly, young humans who cried and had to be comforted, family groups who refused to separate and slowed down the entire process. Any efficient military force would have simply moved the civilians by force, prioritizing speed over feelings. But humans did not work that way. Vecthar watched Communications Officer Jae-hyun Song spend an hour convincing an elderly woman to leave her home. He observed Medical Officer Yoon-ji Kang treating a child's minor injury with the same care she would give a critical wound. He documented Security Chief Myung-woo Shin carrying sleeping children to the transports because their parents had too many bags to manage. Why? Vecthar asked Chief Engineer Soo-min Lee as she helped load cargo. Why waste time on inefficient compassion? The engineer paused, wiping sweat from her forehead. Because they're people, observer. That's not a waste. That's the point. Vecthar did not understand. He noted it in his reports as further evidence of human emotional dysfunction interfering with military objectives. On the 4th day, alarms screamed through the ship. Vecthar rushed to the bridge, his recording equipment active. The main display showed 12 hostile vessels dropping out of hyperspace. The mercenary fleet had arrived 2 days early. Status of evacuation? Captain Park's voice was calm. 70% complete, Lieutenant Choi reported. 6,000 civilians still planetside. 4 transports still loading. Vekthar calculated quickly. The mercenaries would reach weapons range in 30 minutes. The transports needed at least 2 hours to complete loading and achieve safe jump distance. The math was simple. Evacuation was impossible. "We need to withdraw," Vekthar said. It was not his place to advise, but the tactical reality was obvious. "You cannot save them. Retreat to preserve your forces." Captain Park looked at him. In that moment, Vekthar saw something in the human's eyes that his species had bred out of themselves millennia ago. It was not logic. It was not calculation. It was something else entirely. "No," the captain said simply. "Contact Coalition Command," Park ordered. "Inform them we are remaining to cover the evacuation. Request immediate reinforcements." "Captain, reinforcements cannot arrive in time," Lieutenant Choi said softly. "I know." The bridge was silent. Vekthar watched the crew exchange glances. No words were spoken, but something passed between them. Some shared understanding that made no tactical sense. "Battle stations," Captain Park commanded. "Signal the escort vessels. We're forming a defensive screen between the hostiles and the transports." Vekthar's translator struggled to process what he was hearing. 3 ships against 12, no possibility of victory, no logical reason to stay. The humans were choosing to face certain destruction to buy time for civilians who were not even their blood relatives, not even from their home planet. "This is insanity," Vekthar said. Ensign Kyung-ho Bae, barely old enough to qualify for military service by Xylothian standards, turned from his weapons station. The young human's hands were steady on his controls. "Maybe," he said quietly, "but someone has to stand." The escort vessels, the Morning Light and the Shield of Tomorrow, moved into formation without question. 3 small ships positioning themselves between danger and the defenseless. Vekthar checked his equipment, ensuring everything was recording properly. He had come to document human weakness. He was about to witness something else entirely, though he did not yet have words for what it would be. The mercenary fleet advanced, the transports continued their desperate loading, and the humans prepared to do the most illogical, inefficient, tactically absurd thing possible. They prepared to fight. Vekthar's recording equipment captured everything as the first weapons powered up, as the crew worked in focused silence, as Captain Park gave the order that would define everything to follow. "All ships, hold the line. No matter what comes, we hold the line." The battle was about to begin. The mercenary fleet approached like predators circling wounded prey. Vekthar watched the tactical display with the detached interest of someone observing an experiment with a foregone conclusion. 12 warships against 3. The math was brutal and simple. Communications Officer Song opened channels to the hostile fleet. Vekthar listened as the young human offered negotiation, proposed terms, suggested peaceful resolution. His voice remained calm and professional even as the enemy vessels closed the distance. Song was buying time, Vekthar realized. Every minute of talking was another minute for the transports to load civilians. The mercenary response was crude and direct. No negotiation, no terms, just a demand for immediate surrender. "Negative," Captain Park replied. "We're protecting civilian vessels engaged in lawful evacuation. You have no legal authority here." The mercenary commander laughed. The sound was ugly through the speakers. "Legal authority? We have 12 ships. That's all the authority we need." The channel closed. Weapons powered up across the enemy fleet. Vekthar braced himself for what would come next. In every battle he had observed, this was where the weaker force would attempt aggressive tactics to compensate for their disadvantage. Desperate attacks, risky maneuvers, the kind of choices that came from panic. But the humans did something different. "Defensive formation theta," Lieutenant Choi commanded. "All power to forward shields. Weapons to minimum sustainable charge." Vecthar's mandibles twitched in confusion. They were reducing their weapons' power? That made no tactical sense. Unless... He watched the 3 human ships move into a formation he had never seen in any military database. They positioned themselves not for optimal firing angles, not for tactical advantage, but purely to create a barrier between the mercenaries and the transports behind them. The morning light took the center position. The Shield of Tomorrow covered the left flank. The Aegis Dawn held the right, positioning itself to cover the most vulnerable transport. "They're not fighting to win," Vecthar said aloud, realization dawning. "They're fighting to protect." Chief Engineer Lee glanced at him from her station. "What's the difference?" "Everything. Every tactical principle of warfare assumes the objective is victory over the enemy. But your objective is not victory. Your objective is time." "Now you're learning," Lee said, then turned back to her controls. "Rerouting power from secondary systems to shields. We're going to take a beating." The first mercenary salvo struck the Shield of Tomorrow. The smaller escort vessel shuddered under the impact, but held position. Its shields flared bright, absorbing energy that would have crippled most ships. Return fire was minimal, precisely calculated to maintain shield strength rather than maximize damage. More salvos came. The 3 human ships absorbed hit after hit, their shields flashing like stars being born and dying. Vecthar monitored the damage reports flowing across his screens. Hull breaches on the morning light, shield generator stress on the Aegis Dawn, power fluctuations across all 3 vessels. But they held the line. A transport signaled completion of loading and began its flight toward jump distance. The mercenaries tried to redirect fire toward it. The human ships shifted formation instantly, keeping themselves between the enemy and the fleeing civilians. The Shield of Tomorrow took a devastating hit protecting that transport, its shields dropping to 30% capacity. "Shield of Tomorrow, fall back," Captain Park ordered. "Negative Aegis Dawn." The voice of Captain Chen from the escort vessel was firm. "We can still fight. Your shields are failing. Then we'll use our hull. We're not leaving." Vecthar felt something strange in his chest. His species had eliminated such physiological responses generations ago, but he recognized it from biological texts. It was what humans called emotion. He was feeling something about what he witnessed. A second transport reached jump distance and vanished into hyperspace. Then a third. The human ships were succeeding despite all tactical logic saying they should fail, but the cost was mounting. Vecthar watched damage reports with new eyes. These were not just data points. These were people being hurt. "Hull breach, Deck 7, someone shouted. The ship shook. Alarms screamed. Vecthar grabbed onto his console as the deck tilted under his feet. Damage reports flooded in. Deck 7 was exposed to space. 14 crew members lost. Medical teams scrambling. Fires on decks 8 and 9. Vecthar had observed hundreds of battles. He knew what came next. This was where morale broke, where discipline failed, where the reality of death turned soldiers into panicked survivors who thought only of escape. But the humans did not break. "Seal Deck 7, Captain Park ordered, his voice still steady. "Medical teams to Deck 8. Fire suppression to Deck 9. All other stations maintain position." The crew worked faster. Not slower. Not panicked. Faster. Ensign Bay's hands flew over his weapons console, manually targeting systems after automation failed. Medical Officer Kang coordinated rescue operations while simultaneously treating wounded at her station. Engineer Lee rerouted power around damaged systems, maintaining shields through sheer determination and skill. "Why?" Vecthar asked Lieutenant Choi. 14 of your crew just died. Why are you not retreating?" The lieutenant's eyes were wet. Humans leaked water when they felt pain, but her hands were steady on her controls. Because 15,000 civilians haven't evacuated yet. 14 died, so those 15,000 can live. We don't dishonor their sacrifice by running. Vecthar did not understand. His species had eliminated honor along with emotion. They had calculated that such concepts reduced efficiency. But watching the humans fight harder after suffering losses, he wondered if his people had calculated wrong. Another transport jumped to safety, then another. The mercenaries concentrated fire on the morning light, trying to eliminate one defender to break the formation. The escort vessel's shields failed completely. Energy weapons scored black marks across its hull. Atmosphere vented from a dozen breaches. The Aegis Dawn moved to shield its damaged sister ship. Captain Park positioned his vessel directly in front of the morning light, taking fire meant for the crippled escort. The hull shook so hard, Vecthar's recording equipment fell from his grip. "Shields at 20%, Engineer Lee reported. "Maintain position," Park ordered. "Captain, we can't take much more," Choi said quietly. "We don't need much more. Just a little longer." The last transport signaled completion. It began its flight toward safety. The mercenaries, frustrated by the stubborn defense, pushed forward for a final strike. All 12 enemy ships concentrated fire on the 3 battered human vessels. The last transport jumped away. The evacuation was complete. 15,000 civilians were safe, but the 3 human ships were surrounded, damaged, and outgunned. They had succeeded in their mission. Now came the price of that success. The mercenary commander's voice came through the speakers. "You fought well. Surrender now, and we'll take you as prisoners instead of destroying you." Vecthar waited for Captain Park's response. The logical choice was obvious. The humans had accomplished their objective. Surrender was reasonable. Survival was logical. But Vecthar was learning that humans did not always choose logic. Captain Park did not answer immediately. Instead, he opened ship-wide communications. His voice reached every deck, every station, every crew member still alive and fighting. "This is the captain. The mercenary fleet has offered terms. Surrender in exchange for being taken as prisoners. I'm putting it to a vote. You all have 30 seconds to respond through your terminals. This decision belongs to all of us." Vecthar's translator struggled with what he was hearing. A vote? During battle? Decisions made by consensus among common soldiers? This was beyond inefficient. This was chaos. But the responses came in quickly. Vecthar watched the results appear on the tactical display. One by one, the votes registered. Negative, negative, negative. Not a single crew member voted to surrender. Medical Officer Kang's voice came through the bridge speakers. "Captain, I need to explain something. Those mercenaries are Krill slavers. I recognize their ship signatures from medical databases. Prisoners don't go to detention. They go to labor camps. They're sold." The bridge was quiet. Vecthar understood now. The humans were not choosing between surrender and death. They were choosing between types of death, slavery or battle. Both led to the same end for most, but one allowed them to die free. "Thank you, Doctor," Captain Park said. "The vote is counted. All crew members rejected surrender. We fight." The mercenary commander sounded genuinely puzzled. "You can't win. Why choose death?" "Because death on our feet is better than life on our knees," Park replied. "If you want these ships, you'll have to take them." The mercenaries opened fire with renewed fury. The battle that followed was unlike anything in Vecthar's databases. The 3 human ships were battered, bleeding atmosphere, running on backup systems and prayer. But they fought with a coordination that seemed impossible, given their damage. Vecthar moved through the ship with his recording equipment, documenting what he saw. On the weapons deck, Ensign Bay manually aimed and fired each shot. The young human's hands shook. Sweat ran down his face, but he did not stop. "Why do you continue?" Vecthar asked him. "The logical outcome is clear." Bay fired another shot. A mercenary ship's shield flickered under the impact. Maybe. But someone has to stand. Someone has to show them that some things are worth dying for. If we surrender, if we kneel, then they win more than just this battle. They win the idea that power is all that matters. That is illogical. Ideas do not change tactical reality. The ensign smiled, though his hands still shook. No, but ideas change what we're willing to do about tactical reality. That's the difference. Vecthar moved to the engineering deck. Chief Lee was rerouting power through systems that should not be capable of carrying that much energy. Burns covered her arms where electrical feedback had struck her, but she kept working. Hull integrity at 40%, she reported to someone, but I can hold it together a little longer. How? Vecthar asked. The structural damage should cause collapse. Should. Probably will. But not yet. Not while people still need me to keep this ship flying. On the medical deck, Dr. Kang worked on 3 wounded crew members simultaneously. Her efficiency was remarkable, but Vecthar noticed something else. She spoke to each patient, offered comfort, wasted precious seconds on words instead of pure medical treatment. Why speak to them? Vecthar asked. Your time would be more efficiently spent on treatment alone. Kang looked at him while her hands continued their work. Because they're scared. Because hearing a friendly voice helps them fight to stay alive. Because they're people, not just bodies to repair. The ship shook from another impact. Kang steadied herself and kept working. Vecthar returned to the bridge. The tactical situation was deteriorating. The shield of tomorrow had lost main power. The morning light was down to maneuvering thrusters only. The Aegis Dawn was holding together through will and improvisation alone. But they were still fighting. More remarkably, they were fighting as one coordinated unit despite their damage. Lieutenant Choi called out firing solutions to all 3 ships. The shield of tomorrow, running on backup power, positioned itself to absorb fire meant for the morning light. The morning light used its remaining weapons to create covering fire for the Aegis Dawn. They're covering each other's weaknesses, Vecthar said, understanding blooming in his mind. Each ship sacrifices its own optimal position to protect the others. We're crew, Security Chief Shin said from his station. His face was bruised, his uniform torn, but his voice was steady. We don't leave each other behind. Vecthar watched the battle unfold with new comprehension. His species had bred out emotion because they calculated it made soldiers weak. But humans were not weak despite their emotions. They were strong because of them. Their fear made them brave. Their love for each other made them fierce. Their grief for fallen comrades made them fight harder. A Xylothian soldier fought because it was programmed to fight. A human soldier fought because they chose to fight, and choice made all the difference. The mercenary flagship pushed forward, clearly intending to destroy the Aegis Dawn and break the defensive formation. Captain Park watched it approach. Vecthar could see the calculation in the captain's eyes. The math was simple. One damaged ship could not stop a flagship. But one damaged ship traveling at full speed could ram that flagship, could take it out of the battle, could turn 12 enemies into 11. The cost would be the Aegis Dawn and everyone aboard, but it might give the other 2 ships a chance. Helm, plot ramming course, Park ordered quietly. All crew, this is the captain. Prepare for impact. It's been an honor serving with you. The crew did not argue, did not protest. Vecthar watched them prepare for death with a calmness that seemed impossible. They secured equipment. They braced themselves. Some spoke quick words to each other. Some were silent, but none showed panic. Ensign Bay left his weapons station and walked to Vecthar. The young human held out his hand. Thank you for witnessing this. Tell people what you saw here. Tell them why we fought. Vecthar took the hand. For the first time in his life, he felt grief, not for himself, for these humans who were about to die. I will tell them, Vecthar promised. The Aegis Dawn accelerated toward the mercenary flagship. Vecthar braced himself. His recording equipment was still running. If he died here, at least the data would survive. At least someone would know what humanity truly meant. The flagship grew larger in the view screen. Closer, closer. The collision was seconds away. Vecthar found himself hoping, though hope was supposed to be an emotion his species had eliminated. He hoped these humans would be remembered. He hoped their sacrifice would matter. The space around them suddenly filled with light. Not weapons fire, something else. Something that made the view screen adjust its brightness filters. Vecthar looked at the tactical display and could not process what he saw. Ships. Dozens of them. Hundreds of them. Warships from every species in the coalition, dropping out of hyperspace in a coordinated arrival that surrounded the mercenary fleet. The cavalry had arrived. But how? Reinforcements could not possibly reach them in time. Vecthar had calculated it himself. Unless... The transports, Lieutenant Choi said, understanding in her voice. The civilians we saved, they didn't just run, they called for help, they spread the word. And the galaxy had answered. 73 warships materialized around the battlefield. Vecthar recognized their signatures. Xylothian cruisers, Manthari destroyers, Corvalli carriers, even proud Zentani battleships, and the Zentani rarely joined coalition operations. Every major species in the galaxy was represented in the fleet that had come, but they had not come for the coalition. They had come for humanity. The mercenary fleet immediately tried to flee. 12 ships against 73 was not battle. It was suicide. They scattered in different directions, hoping some would escape while the coalition fleet chose which ones to pursue. But Vecthar noticed something that made his analytical mind recalculate everything he thought he understood about galactic warfare. The coalition fleet did not immediately destroy the mercenaries. Instead, they positioned themselves in a formation he recognized. It was the same defensive screen the humans had used. The massive fleet surrounded the 3 battered human vessels, protecting them. Coalition fleet, this is Captain Park of the Aegis Dawn. Thank you for your assistance, but we can still fight. Negative, Aegis Dawn. The voice belonged to a Xylothian commander. You have fought enough. Now let others stand for you. Vecthar felt another emotion he could not name. His people had answered the call. His species, who prided themselves on logic and efficiency, had dropped everything to rescue humans. Because humans had stood when running was logical. Because humans had chosen others over themselves. The mercenary flagship tried to break through the coalition lines. 3 Xylothian cruisers moved to intercept, and Vecthar watched his people fight with a fury he had never seen from them. They did not fight with cold efficiency. They fought with something that looked almost like anger, like they had taken personal offense to what the mercenaries tried to do. Most of the mercenary fleet was allowed to flee. Their ships were fast, and they scattered to different jump points. But the coalition fleet did not pursue all of them. Instead, they focused on specific targets. The prison ships, the vessels carrying enslaved beings from previous raids. All ships, target the slave vessels, the Xylothian commander ordered. Disable but do not destroy. We're bringing those prisoners home. Vecthar watched the coordinated operation. Precision strikes that disabled engines without breaching hulls. Boarding parties that moved through the captured vessels, freeing prisoners who had thought they would never see home again. And leading those boarding parties, despite his injuries, was Security Chief Shin from the Aegis Dawn. The human moved through the prison ship corridors with his team, cutting through locked doors, deactivating restraint fields, and speaking calmly to terrified prisoners in a dozen different languages. Vecthar followed with his recording equipment, documenting everything. You're safe now, Shin said to a Corvalli family huddled in a cell. The bad people are gone. We're taking you home. Why? The Corvalli father asked. Why would humans risk themselves for us? Shin smiled, though he was clearly in pain from his wounds. because someone had to, and because you would do the same for us. Over the next hours, Vekthar watched rescue operations across multiple ships. Medical Officer Kang worked without rest, treating freed prisoners from a dozen species. She did not prioritize humans. She treated based on medical need, spending as much time on an injured Manthari as she would on her own crew. "Doctor, you should rest," Vekthar said as he watched her treat her 20th patient. "You are injured yourself." Kang looked down at the burns on her arms as if noticing them for the first time. "These can wait. That Zentani child over there cannot wait. She's dehydrated and malnourished. My burns are not life-threatening. Her condition is. But she is not human. She is not your responsibility. She's a child who needs help. That makes her my responsibility. That makes her everyone's responsibility." Vekthar moved through the fleet over the following days, observing the aftermath of battle. He watched repair crews from multiple species work together to fix the human ships. He saw a Manthari engineer teaching a human technique for welding hull breaches. He observed a human mechanic sharing a joke with a Xylothian technician. He documented species who had been strangers before becoming friends through shared purpose. The memorial service for the fallen was held on the Aegis Dawn. Representatives from every ship in the rescue fleet attended. Vekthar stood in the back of the crowded room and watched Captain Park speak about the 14 crew members who died on Deck 7. "They stood when they could have run," Park said quietly. "They chose others when they could have chosen themselves. They died as they lived, with courage and purpose. We honor them by living the same way." One by one, crew members spoke about their fallen friends, not just tactical evaluations, not just service records. They told stories, funny moments, shared memories. The time engineer Nam fixed the food processors by hitting them in exactly the right spot. The way Ensign Rodriguez always hummed while working. How Lieutenant Yamada made terrible jokes that somehow made everyone laugh anyway. Vekthar listened to humans grieve. They did not hide their pain. They did not suppress their sorrow. They felt it fully, supported each other through it, and then helped each other begin to heal. He saw Captain Park visit every injured crew member in medical, knowing every name, every family situation, every personal detail. This was leadership his species did not practice. This was caring. Lieutenant Choi found Vekthar in an observation room days later. He was reviewing his recordings, trying to write his report, but the words would not come. How could he describe what he had witnessed in dry tactical language? "What will you tell them?" Choi asked. "Your superiors, the coalition. What will you say about humans?" Vekthar was quiet for a long time. "I came here to document your weaknesses, your emotions, your inefficiency, your tactical failures." "And did you find them?" "Yes, you are all of those things. You feel too much. You care too much. You sacrifice efficiency for compassion. By every measure my species uses, you should fail at warfare." Choi smiled slightly. "But we don't fail." "No, you do not fail. Because you understand something my species forgot. Warfare is not about efficiency. It is about purpose. You do not fight to fight. You fight to protect. You fight to save. You fight for something beyond victory." "What will you tell them?" she asked again. Vekthar looked at his recordings, thousands of hours of footage, documentation of everything he had seen, humans standing when they should run. Humans sacrificing when they should save themselves. Humans caring when they should calculate. "I will tell them the truth," he said finally. "Human military doctrine is incompatible with galactic standards, and I will recommend that we immediately change galactic standards to match human principles." Choi's eyes widened. "That will cause controversy." "Yes. My superiors will likely reject it. They will say I was corrupted by emotion. They will say I forgot my objectivity. Were you? Did you? Vecthar thought about Ensign Bay's shaking hands that never stopped firing, about Chief Lee working through burns and pain, about Dr. Kang choosing patients by need rather than species, about Captain Park knowing every crew member's name, about 14 humans dying so 15,000 civilians could live. Perhaps I was corrupted, or perhaps I was simply reminded of what it means to be alive. Captain Park entered the observation room. Observer Vecthar, I have a proposition. The Coalition wants a permanent liaison aboard the Aegis Dawn, someone to help integrate human and galactic forces. I'd like you to take the position. You want me to stay? If you want to. You've seen us at our worst and our best. You understand us better than most. And I think we could learn from you too. Vecthar looked at the stars through the observation window. Then he looked at the humans who had changed everything he thought he knew. I accept. 6 months passed. Vecthar remained aboard the Aegis Dawn, no longer as an observer, but as a student. He learned what humans could teach, and the lessons were not what he expected. Ensign Bay taught him about fear. They sat in the weapons bay during a quiet shift, and the young human explained what it felt like when his hands shook during battle. I was terrified, Bay admitted. Every shot I took I thought might be my last. My training said to stay calm, but calm was impossible. So instead, I accepted the fear. I let it tell me what mattered. And what mattered was protecting people. But fear reduces efficiency, Vecthar said. My species eliminated it for that reason. Maybe. But fear also tells you what you value. If you feel no fear, how do you know what's worth protecting? How do you know what matters? Vecthar had no answer. His species knew what mattered because they were programmed to know. But was that the same as choosing what mattered? He was beginning to understand it was not. Chief Engineer Lee taught him about purpose. She showed him how she maintained the ship, treating each system with care that went beyond mere function. This ship kept us alive, Lee explained as she repaired a power conduit. It took damage meant for us. It held together when it should have fallen apart. I maintain it not because it's my job, but because I owe it respect. It is a machine. It has no awareness of respect. Maybe not, but I have awareness. And how I treat things, even machines, says something about who I am. Efficiency is doing things right. Purpose is doing the right things. There's a difference. Medical Officer Kong taught him about healing. Vecthar spent time in medical bay, watching her treat both physical and emotional wounds. One day, she spent an hour talking with a crew member who had nightmares about the battle. Your wounds are healed, Vecthar observed after the crew member left. Why spend time on psychological issues? They do not affect physical function. Don't they? Fear affects performance. Trauma affects decision-making. But more than that, healing is not just about fixing bodies. It's about helping people be whole, mind and body together. That is inefficient, Kang smiled. Maybe, but it's human, and it works. That crew member will return to duty stronger than before, not because I forced him to suppress his feelings, but because I helped him process them. Vecthar found the lessons difficult. His species had spent generations removing emotion, eliminating what they saw as weakness. Now he was learning to feel again. At first it was painful. Grief hit him when he thought about the 14 crew members who died. Fear touched him when he remembered how close they all came to destruction. Joy surprised him when he shared a meal with the crew and found himself actually enjoying their company. The emotions were overwhelming. Several times he considered leaving, returning to his homeworld where everything made sense, where logic ruled and feelings did not complicate simple decisions. But each time, something made him stay. One evening he found Captain Park in the observation deck, looking at the stars. Vecthar joined him in silence. They stood together for several minutes before Park spoke. Having second thoughts about staying? How did you know? Because feeling things for the first time is hard. You're experiencing what human children go through, except you're doing it as an adult with an analytical mind that wants to categorize and control everything. That's a difficult combination. My species was right to eliminate emotion. It complicates everything. Does it? Or does it clarify what really matters? Vecthar was quiet. Park continued. Logic can tell you the most efficient path, but it can't tell you if that path is worth taking. Emotion tells you what has value, what's worth protecting, what's worth dying for. Without it, you can calculate everything and understand nothing. But I hurt now. I feel pain for people I barely knew. I feel fear for people I care about. This seems like weakness. It is weakness. But it's also strength. The pain you feel for those 14 crew members? That's what made the rest of us fight harder to protect the civilians. The fear you feel for people you care about? That's what makes you brave enough to protect them. You can't have the strength without accepting the weakness. Vecthar submitted his final report to the Coalition 3 months into his liaison assignment. It was not the report he had planned to write. It was not cold, tactical analysis. It was not documentation of human weaknesses. Instead, it was a recommendation that changed everything. The Coalition Council debated his report for weeks. Vecthar's superiors called him back to explain himself. They accused him of losing objectivity. They said he had been corrupted by human emotion. They demanded he reconsider his recommendations. But Vecthar stood firm. He presented his recordings. He showed the battle. He demonstrated how 3 damaged ships held off 12 through coordination born from trust rather than programming. He explained how humans fought harder after suffering losses, how they chose sacrifice over survival, how they earned loyalty from other species by demonstrating it first. The council remained divided. Then the civilians spoke. 15,000 beings who had been evacuated from the Kepler sector sent testimonies. They described humans who stayed when they could have fled. They explained what it meant to know someone would die for you, not because they were ordered to, but because they chose to. One testimony came from an elderly Corvalli woman. That human officer spent an hour convincing me to leave my home. He did not force me. He did not threaten me. He spoke to me like I mattered, like my feelings mattered. Then he died protecting the ship that carried me to safety. I do not know his name, but I know he chose to value my life over his own. That choice changed me. It should change all of us. The Council voted to adopt modified human combat principles, not wholesale replacement of galactic doctrine, but integration of human values. Protection of civilians became priority. Emotional well-being of soldiers was recognized as tactical necessity. Sacrifice for others was honored rather than seen as logical failure. It was a small change, but it was a beginning. Vecthar eventually returned to his homeworld, but not to his military position. Instead, he became a teacher. He opened an academy that taught young Xylothians about emotion, about choice, about what humanity had shown the galaxy. Many rejected his teachings. They said he was corrupted, that he had betrayed Xylothian principles. But some listened. Some young Xylothians began questioning whether eliminating emotion made them superior or just empty. One student asked him why he had changed his entire life for human principles. Vecthar thought carefully before answering. I was sent to observe humans in battle. I expected to see weakness. Instead, I saw strength I did not know existed. I saw people choose others over themselves. I saw fear become courage. I saw grief become determination. I saw love become fierce protection. I observed humans in battle, and they taught me what it means to be truly alive. Years passed. Vecthar watched his students graduate. They were different from previous generations of Xylothians. They laughed. They cried. They cared about things beyond efficiency and logic. They were beginning to understand what humans knew instinctively. Some things were worth dying for, some things were worth living for, and knowing the difference required feeling, not just thinking. One evening, Vecthar sat in his quarters writing a message. It was addressed to Captain Minseok Park, commander of the Aegis Dawn wherever he was now. They still corresponded regularly, sharing thoughts across the distances of space. "You asked me once what I witnessed that changed me," Vecthar wrote. "I told you I witnessed humanity in battle, but that was not the complete truth. I witnessed humanity being human. I saw you choose compassion when logic said choose efficiency. I saw you value lives when calculation said value victory. I saw you feel pain and transform it into purpose. You showed me that being alive is not about existing. It is about choosing what matters and having the courage to protect it. Thank you for teaching me what my species forgot. Thank you for showing me how to feel." He sent the message and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, humans were still fighting their battles, still choosing others over themselves, still demonstrating that strength comes not from eliminating weakness, but from accepting it and fighting anyway. Vecthar had been sent to observe humans, but in the end, they had observed him. They had seen something in him worth saving, even when he could not see it himself. They had shown him how to be more than just logical. They had taught him how to be alive. And that lesson had changed everything.